On May 2nd, 2026, three cavers stood at the entrance of Kuzgun, one of the deepest caves in Turkey, 1,300 meters of cold limestone sunk into the Aladaglar. The rock sits at 3 degrees. The shafts are long enough that a dropped stone falls out of hearing before it lands. 3 people went down that morning, and all 3 had done this before. None of them had done it together, and that mattered more than any of them knew yet. Their call-out time was 20 hours out. What does a pull-through trip ask of you that a normal descent never does? Finality, mostly. You pull the rope down behind you, and the cave closes like a door. Emre was 36, an Istanbul caver with 7 Aladaglar expeditions behind him, who promised his wife a message from the ridge before every trip. He was the one who wanted this route, and he had argued for it for 2 seasons. Layla was 33, the strongest climber of the 3, the one who retied every knot Emre tied because she trusted nobody's hands but her own. Okan was 45, the oldest, quiet, slow to anger. His habit was the pull test. Load the pull-down rope with full body weight and watch it run before anybody commits, every trip, because a rope that runs on a test can still jam on the pull. Kuzgun drops in a chain of clean shafts toward a river level, and the route they had chosen crosses a 100-meter pitch with no way back up it. The plan was the through route Emre had argued for. 9 pitches down, the rope pulled after the 100-meter pitch, 4 kilometers of lower series to the resurgence, 14 hours door to door. What they didn't know, the flake at the top of the big pitch had a crack behind it just wide enough to eat a moving rope. They went down at 6. The early pitches ran like clockwork, descenders hissing under load, meltwater ticking off helmets, the rope creaking at every rebelay. Layla went first on every pitch. At the big pitch, 6 hours in and on schedule, they stood on the boulder floor under 100 meters of hanging rope. Okan ran his pull test, and it ran clean. What they didn't know, it had run clean past the flake by half a meter, and the real pull would not. 20 meters into the pull, that is when the route failed them, because the rope walked sideways into the crack behind the flake and stopped dead, and no amount of weight would move it another centimeter. Emre pulled until his hands bled. Layla tried a hauling system off a boulder and moved nothing. The rope hung there, 30 meters of it in reach, 70 jammed above, attached to nothing they could use. Here is what you need to understand about a jammed pull-through. It is worse than no rope at all. A cut rope tells you your options. A jammed one keeps promising. And this is where the arithmetic stops being about equipment and starts being about 3 tired people making decisions in the cold. So what does a dead end actually do to a team? It finds the crack in it, the way water finds one in rock. Emre wanted to climb the jammed rope and free it, and you could hear in his voice that he had already decided. Layla told him no, twice, flat. Because a rope jammed on a flake can cut on the same flake with a man on it. And because they had been underground 9 hours, and the cold was already making the decisions feel smaller than they were. By early evening, the argument had teeth. The rope had failed. The route was gone. Nobody up top knew. Emre blamed the route out loud, and Okan said nothing at all, which was worse. Layla stood between them with the survey held flat under her lamp, and made them both look at it until they stopped talking over her. Because this is the arithmetic of their position. 4 kilometers of lower series to a resurgence none of them had seen, a pitch that could not be reclimbed, a call-out 14 hours out, and cold that works on an angry man faster than a calm one. Emre checked the same crab on his harness 4 times in a minute. Layla watched him and said nothing, because you do not point out a man's hands to him. At 7, Emre grabbed the rope again anyway. The panic was doing his thinking now. Layla put her hand flat on his chest and said one word, and he stopped, and he put it down. Watch 3 careers of caving survive one argument. They did what the survey said and not what the fear said. They took the 30 meters of rope they could reach, cut it free, and committed to the lower series with 1 shortened rope and 11 hours of dark left. The river level ran waist deep in places and black everywhere, and the cold came through their oversuits in the first 100 meters. Okan broke trail the whole way, an hour at a stretch, and never once said whose fault it was, and that silence held the team together better than any rope. Behind him, Emre talked too much and too fast, the way frightened men do, and Layla answered just enough to keep him moving. Put yourself in that passage for 1 hour of it, 3 degrees, wet to the ribs, a shortened rope, and 2 people ahead of you who almost came apart at the bottom of a shaft. And the arithmetic of a resurgence that had to exist because the survey said so. Would you have trusted a line on paper that much? They did, and that is the whole story. They waited out of the resurgence at 4 in the morning, 22 hours after they went in, 2 hours before their call-out would have fired. One wrong junction in the river level, and they would have been trapped below a pitch nobody could reclimb. Emery sat down in the streambed and did not move for 10 minutes, and neither of the others rushed him. The expedition report recorded a pull-through rope jammed in a flake crack at the 100-meter pitch, a team decision to commit forward with a shortened rope, and a 4-kilometer river-level exit with no injury and no call-out raised. The club rigs that pitch with a steel deviation now, and the flake has a name nobody says in front of Emery. One of the deepest caves in Turkey still drops its 1,300 meters under the Aladaglar. A rope that runs on a test can still jam on the pull, Okan still teaches, and Layla teaches the other half. The route does not care who argued for it. The report recorded 70 meters of rope still in the crack, and Emery sent the message from the ridge at dawn, 2 days of silence later. On June 21, 2026, 3 cavers crossed boot-deep snow to the mouth of the Abisso Michele Gortani, one of the deepest caves in Italy, into air that smelled of wet stone and tasted like winter. 920 meters of shafts drop under Monte Canin from there, and the rock holds 2 degrees all year. The wind at the entrance never stops, and it follows you down the first 100 meters like something with an opinion. 3 went down, Franca, Silvio, and Dario, the youngest, carrying the new survey gear he had talked the club into buying. Their call-out time was 18 hours out. What does a deep alpine cave ask of you that a valley cave never does? Margins, mostly. Everything down there is further from help than it looks on the survey. Franca was 38, a Trieste caver with 9 Canin expeditions behind her, who promised her daughter a photograph of the snowfield before every trip. She led the hard pitches and everybody let her. Silvio was 44, her rope partner of 11 years, the one who never hurried and never let anybody else hurry. His habit was the 3-point rule. On any traverse, 3 points of contact before you trust the 4th, every trip, because ledges in this cave are frost-shattered and lie about their strength. The Gortani route crosses a gallery where the floor falls away, and the way on is a rock ledge above a 20-meter drop, protected by an old traverse line. The plan was a survey camp at 600 meters, 8 pitches down, the traverse gallery, 2 nights underground, 16 hours door-to-door each way. What they didn't know, the winter's freeze had worked a meter of that ledge loose from the wall, and it was waiting for weight. They went down at 5. The early pitches ran like clockwork, descenders hissing under load, boots knocking grit off the ledges, meltwater ticking off their helmets, the traverse line creaking where it had creaked for 20 years. At the traverse, 7 hours in and on schedule, Franca clipped the old line and started across the ledge the way she had crossed it 9 times before. What she didn't know, the meter of rock under her 3rd step was attached to the mountain by frost and habit and nothing else. Halfway across, that is when the mountain failed her, because the ledge shattered under her boots and went down the drop in pieces, and she went with it to the end of the traverse line. The old line held. She stopped 3 meters down the wall, hanging over the drop, and the ledge she needed to stand on to get back was gone. 10 meters of gallery now had no floor at all. Here is what you need to understand about a broken traverse. The fall is not the problem. The gap is. A caver on a line above a drop is safe until she is exhausted, and this is where the arithmetic stops being about the rock and starts being about how long arms last at 2 degrees. So what does a missing ledge do to the 2 people who watched it go? It splits them, fast and ugly. Silvio wanted to rig a rope straight down to her and haul. Dario wanted to go back up 8 pitches for help, and he said so with his voice climbing half an octave every sentence, and his hands would not stay still on the rope bag. He was 29, on his first bad day underground, and both of the others knew it before he did. The shouting lasted 4 minutes. The ledge had failed. Franca hung on the line. Nobody above could reach her, and the clock was hers, not theirs. It was Franca who ended the argument, from the wall, in the flat voice she used on hard pitches. "One problem at a time," she said. And the first problem was a rebelay bolt 2 meters from her right hand. Because this is the arithmetic of a hanging caver. An upright harness hang starts shutting the body down inside 20 minutes. She had already spent 6 of them arguing, and the nearest bolt was 2 meters of blank wall away. Watch 11 years of a rope partnership work without a wasted word. Silvio lowered her a loop of rope with a jammer already on it, weighted with a spare crab so it swung true, because you do not make a hanging partner reach. Franca caught it on the second swing, clipped in, and unweighted the old line 1 limb at a time, the way you take weight off a bad anchor, as if it might notice. Her forearms were already past burning and into the dangerous quiet after it. Then came the part nobody films. 90 minutes of rigging a new line across 10 meters of gallery with no floor, bolt by bolt, while Franca hung in a sling seat and called the placements she could see from below. Put yourself on that wall for 1 hour of it. 2 degrees, a sling cutting into both legs, and the 2 voices above you taking turns telling you it is going well, and the arithmetic of a drill battery that had 11 holes in it when the gallery needed 9. Would you have counted along? She did, out loud, every hole, and the counting is what kept her voice level. Franca came over the new line at midnight, 4.5 hours after the ledge went, on the last 2 bolts the battery had in it. 20 minutes more, and she would have been trapped in the sling seat with arms too far gone to climb. Dario had gone quiet somewhere an hour too. When she was up, he shook her hand very formally, and then he sat down on a rock and cried, and nobody has mentioned it then or since. The expedition report recorded a frost-shattered ledge failing under load on a protected traverse, a 4.5-hour self-rescue by re-rig, and a drill battery finished to its last hole, with no injury and no call-out raised. The gallery carries a permanent steel line now, and the club calls it the Moretti Traverse in the rigging guide. One of the deepest caves in Italy still runs its 900 meters under Monte Canin. 3 points before you trust the 4th, Silvio still teaches, and Franca teaches the half he cannot. Hang calm, count out loud, and make the argument above you end. The report recorded 10 meters of missing floor and 9 bolts, and her daughter got the snowfield photograph 2 days late. On April 9, 2026, 3 cavers walked down into air that smelled of wet clay and moving water into the Rio Camuy system, the longest river cave in the Caribbean, where a whole river leaves the daylight and runs under the karst hills of Puerto Rico. The river is loud enough down there that you learn to read lips. 3 went down that morning, and the sky behind them was already stacking clouds. Their call-out time was 10 hours out. What does a tropical river cave ask of you that a mountain cave never does? Speed, mostly. The weather here does not arrive in fronts, it arrives in minutes. Marisol was 34, a San Juan caver with 100 trips in this system behind her, who promised her father a call from the gate before every descent. She carried the survey, and she was proud of never once needing it. Hector was 40, a hydrologist, the one who checked the forecast 3 times and read the river gauge out loud at the car. Camila was 27, fast and light and new to the team. Her habit was the chalk arrow, mark every junction on the way in, every trip, because a cave you know at noon is a stranger at midnight. The Camuy galleries run in layers above the river, and the dry levels braid and rejoin like the river that cut them. The plan was a photography run to the big chamber, 2 kilometers in on the dry upper level, 3 hours inside, out before the afternoon rain, 6 hours door to door. What they didn't know, a roof collapse in the winter had closed their usual gallery, and the way around it looked almost exactly like the way they knew. They went in at 9. The first hour ran like every good trip, boots ringing on dry flowstone, the river hissing 2 levels below, drips ticking off their helmets, Camila's chalk squeaking at every junction. At the collapse, 1 hour in, Marisol looked at the boulder choke where her gallery used to be and picked the left-hand way around it without opening the survey. What they didn't know, the left-hand way dropped a level in the first 200 meters, so gently that nobody felt it happen. 90 minutes past the collapse, that is when the cave failed them. Because the gallery they were in ended at water that should not have been there, and the passage behind them had 4 junctions that all looked the same going backwards. Marisol opened the survey for the first time in 3 years and could not place them on it. They had been underground 4 hours, and the trip plan said they should have been an hour from daylight. She turned it twice in her hands, and both of the others saw her do it. Hector watched and said nothing, and his silence was its own weather. Camila looked from one to the other and understood all at once that the 2 most experienced people in her life were guessing. Here is what you need to understand about being lost in a river cave. The lost part is survivable. The level is the danger. Dry galleries in Camuy are dry because they are high, and this is where the arithmetic stops being about navigation and starts being about how far above the river you are standing when the rain arrives. So what does an afternoon storm do to a cave like this? It raises the river a meter in an hour, and the river does not stay in its bed. It climbs into the galleries that made you feel safe, lowest first, and they had walked downhill for an hour without noticing. By 1 o'clock the argument was open. The route had failed. The water kept rising. Nobody outside knew, and the chalk had run out 2 junctions back. Hector wanted to follow the water down to the main river and swim the known canyon out, because he trusted the river he had gauged that morning, and because standing still was eating him alive. Marisol said the word no before he finished the sentence, and the two of them stood a meter apart saying the same three arguments louder, in the dark, while the person with the answer waited for a gap. Because this is the arithmetic they were shouting over. The river was rising a meter an hour, the swim was 800 meters, and a swimmer in a flooding canyon does not get to change his mind halfway. Watch the newest caver on the team end the argument. Camila had said nothing for 10 minutes because she had been walking the junctions in her head, backwards, one at a time. Then she said one sentence: "My last arrow is uphill of us, and arrows do not move." They climbed back the way the chalk said, and not the way anybody's memory said. 4 junctions, every one of them uphill, Camila in front reading her own handwriting off the walls, while the river sound behind them changed from a hiss to a roar. Nobody spoke at the junctions. Hector went last, and at every arrow he put 2 fingers on the chalk for a second, like a man checking a pulse. Put yourself at the 3rd junction for 1 minute of it. Warm air turning damp, an arrow half wiped by your own glove, and 2 people behind you who have stopped arguing because they are listening to the water. And the arithmetic of a storm you cannot see filling a river you cannot outswim. Would you have bet everything on chalk? They did, and that is the whole story. They came up onto the known upper level at 2:30 and out of the entrance 40 minutes later, into rain so heavy the gate was a gray wall. The river came up 2 meters that afternoon. The gallery they had argued in at noon was underwater by 4, and anybody still in it would have been trapped against the roof with nowhere left to climb. The trip report recorded a winter roof collapse, an unsurveyed detour that dropped a level without anyone noticing, and a chalk line retreat completed 90 minutes ahead of a 2-meter flood pulse, with no injury and no call-out raised. The club surveys the detour now, and the junction wall still carries her arrows. The longest river cave in the Caribbean still swallows its river under the Camuy Hills. A cave you know at noon is a stranger at midnight, Camilla still teaches, and she is no longer the newest anything. The report recorded 4 junctions and 1 sentence that ended an argument, and Marisol has opened the survey at every junction since.